truth-seeking friends, pull up a chair on the porch where the air is cooler than the headlines, and the only spin is the lazy twirl of a ceiling fan that doesn't care who's trending. Because tonight Samantha Markle isn't rubbernecking at palace gates. We're opening the hood on the engine that drives them. And if you listen close, you can hear the same rattle in it that's been there from day one. The one that says a fairy tale can be staged like a documentary, and a documentary can be staged like a confession. And somehow the audience is expected not to notice the difference. And that, my neighbors, is where the trouble starts. Not with the gowns and the glitz, but with the tone that tells you this isn't just fame, it's meaning, it's virtue, it's moral leadership. And you must applaud on cue or be scolded for missing the moment. And maybe that worked at first. Back when novelty wore a tiara and the cameras caught a smile that seemed to promise a better way, but merciless as a ticking clock. The public learned to pause, rewind, and squint at the seams, asking where reality ends and packaging begins, because trust is slow as honey, and once you spill it, ants arrive. Now I know you guys are excited for more Promomer, but before we delve into further discussion, if you haven't subscribed, come on guys, what are you waiting for? Hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell ASAP. So now, you've seen the arc we all have. From breathless beginnings to brand new beginnings to a brave new world in California, where the light is golden and the interviews are softer than a lullaby, and yet the claims land like thunder. And this is where Samantha tells us the thing nobody wants to hear, that when you market your life as the cure for everyone else's pain, the dosage gets measured with laboratory precision. And any inconsistency becomes a lab report, because the more you sell truth as your product, the more the public will want a receipt with itemized lines, dates, and matching signatures. And when the receipt is fuzzy, folks don't just ask for a refund, they start a recall. And that's how we arrived at this crossroads, where the brand that promised sunlight keeps finding itself under the most unforgiving lamp of all. The one held by viewers who paid with attention and would like their change back. I'm not here to rebroadcast what Samantha is saying, but I'm here to read the room. And the room is telling me that the audience has grown tired of being told that skepticism is cruelty, while marketing is compassion. Because in the new economy, attention is currency and confession is inventory. And when the shelves look rearranged, the shopkeeper gets questions. Not because people are mean, but because they've been burned by too many curated truths that wilted under air conditioning. And if you think they won't notice a wobble between yesterday's documentary and today's talking points, you don't understand how sharp their eyes have become after years of fast edits and soft focus. They will slow the frame, they will pull the thread, they will test the stitch, and if it pops in public. What makes this story different from a dozen other celebrity arcs is that motherhood, service, and moral clarity were not just supporting characters, they were the headline font. And when you position yourself as the promised antidote to an ancient institution's coldness, then you inherit the burden of consistency that institution learned the hard way. Because robes and regalia can weather storms by standing still, but a modern brand stands by motion, and motion needs choreography. And choreography shows when the beat changes mid-song, which is why even people who wanted to believe now sit with folded arms and say, show me the alignment between the speeches and the choices, the interviews and the timelines, the awards and the admissions that came after. Show me that this moral arc is not just a marketing arc with a halo filter. Now let's talk about Harry, because no porch conversation is complete without the shadow of a mother whose legacy is larger than any room, and whose courage taught us that truth can bruise and bless at the same time. And many hoped he would inherit the part of that courage that looks a camera in the eye and says, here is where I was wrong, and here is where I was right, and here are the receipts for both. But too often the posture we got was less reckoning than programming, less clarity than content, a season drop dressed as catharsis, and the public can smell it, not because they are cruel, but because they too have stood in living rooms at midnight telling their own truth to no one. They know what it costs, and if yours looks suspiciously amortized over episodes with sync-worthy musical cues, they call it out, and rightly so. I can hear some of you saying the press is vicious, the palace is archaic, the world is unfair, and I won't argue, because all three can be true, and yet none of them excuse a brand that preaches transparency while practicing ambiguity. The point is not whether life is hard. The point is whether the story you sell survives being set on the table without a placemat. Because if it leaves rings, people notice. If it wobbles, people notice. And if you ask them to clap while insisting clapping is healing, then you cannot scold them for counting beats. That's not cruelty, that's quality control. The real collision, according to Samantha here, is between privacy as a right and privacy as a prop. And if you think the audience can't tell the difference, you haven't met a parent who turned down 1,000 likes to keep a child's face off a feed. The public respects boundaries that are lived, not just announced. And when you alternate between walls and windows depending on the lighting, don't be surprised when people tap the glass to see if it's fog or fingerprints. Because yes, you can want both privacy and platform. But when platform is monetized and privacy is moralized, the ledger demands balance. And the people who do the accounting now live in your comments section with timestamps and memories longer than the runtime of any special memory specs. So where does that leave the fairy tale? The one that promised modernity without mockery and sincerity without spin? I'll tell you where. It leaves it on the same front steps where every story eventually lands, waiting to see if anyone opens the door and says, "Come in," no cameras, no captions, just coffee and truth. And that's what has been missing. The unscripted daylight where contradictions are owned rather than reframed. Because owning a contradiction is how you turn a scandal into a hinge, a pivot that says, "We learned, we changed, we made amends," instead of another montage that says, "We were always right but misunderstood." And friends, audiences can forgive almost anything except being treated like they cannot see the horizon from their own porch. There's a reason the loudest word in the culture right now is receipts. Not because we are petty accountants, but because we are tired of overdraft fees on our faith. And if your currency is compassion, then the receipt is consistency. If your platform is healing, then the receipt is humility. If your claim is courage, then the receipt is evidence that survives outside the studio. And that's where this saga has stumbled. Not on whether people are kind or cruel, but on whether the narrative respects the intelligence of the crowd it summons every time there's a new reveal, a new doc, a new chapter. And if you continue to treat skepticism as sacrilege, you will keep discovering that disbelief is the only religion the internet practices faithfully. Some will say this scrutiny is sexist, racist, classist, pick your suffix, and yes, bias exists. It stains coverage, it distorts lenses, it infects debates. But bias is not a universal solvent to dissolve every inconvenient question. And when you invoke it as a blanket, people will ask why the blanket keeps coming out at the coldest moments of accountability. And if your answer is always that critics are cruel while supporters are enlightened, you have built a faith, not a case. And faith without works, without evidence, without correction, without self-critique, doesn't travel well. Here is the neighbor truth on the table between us like a chipped mug we've both used 100 times. The public does not demand perfection, it demands proportion. When the moral language elevates, the moral bookkeeping must keep pace. When you place yourself above the fray, you will be asked why your footprints still show in the mud. When you call your journey healing, you will be asked to show who else was healed besides your brand. And those are not cruel questions. They are the ordinary questions of people who have been sold too many cures that tasted like candy and worked like sugar, sweet, brief, and followed by a crash. If there's a path back to trust, it's narrower than a palace corridor and brighter than a studio light. It looks like unpolished candor that admits missteps without blaming editors. It looks like stepping back from the podium of grand narratives and standing in the smaller room where specifics live. It looks like offering timelines that reconcile instead of reroute. It looks like refusing the temptation to turn each critique into a cause and each cause into a commodity. And yes, it looks like resisting the urge to frame every fence as a siege when sometimes it's just a boundary you chose and must live with. As for Harry, the door to the legacy he wanted has never been locked. It is the door that opens when a man says, "I love my wife," and I also love the truth. And when the two collide, I will not choose applause over accuracy. He can still be the son who honors a difficult history by refusing a convenient present. He can still be the father who teaches his children that compassion without clarity is just a warm fog. He can still be the husband who proves that partnership is strongest when it survives the oxygen of honest air. And Meghan, if you want a future where the story isn't constantly interrogated like a suspect, you can have it. Not by outrunning skepticism, but by out-truthing it. Say less and show more. Moralize less and verify more. Choose the small room with a single bright bulb over the hall where the spotlights change color depending on the song. You wanted to modernize an institution, fine, but modernity doesn't mean more mood boards. It means more metrics, more accountability, fewer sweeping sermons, and more sincere, specific steps that the public can see without being told how to feel about them. To the audience, my neighbors with receipts in their back pockets and side eyes that have seen it all, don't surrender your standards, but don't surrender your humanity either. Demand evidence, reject cruelty, distinguish between a fair question and a foul one. Reward clarity wherever you find it, and punish spin by switching it off. Because attention is the only ballot that counts in the marketplace, where fame and meaning get bartered hour by hour. And if you cast your vote carefully, the market will correct. It always does. Not because executives grow consciences, but because audiences grow tired. The radiant image that once sold hope now faces a mirror that does not blink, and there is still a version of this story that can end in something like grace. Not the glossy grace gifted by a magazine cover, but the practical grace earned by people who stop telling everyone that they're the victims of disbelief and start showing everyone that they respect belief enough to earn it back. And if that sounds old-fashioned for a modern fairy tale, it is. But the oldest truths tend to be the ones that survive both the palace and the pilot episode. So here's my porch verdict, given with love for the neighbor who waters your plants when you're away and also tells you when your porch light's out. Celebrity is not destiny, branding is not biography, and a crown made of content weighs more than it looks. If you promise the world a new way, you must walk it in the daylight. If you market yourself as medicine, you cannot keep changing the label. If you ask for trust, you cannot treat it like a renewable resource that refills every time you post. It runs out, and when it does, the only refill is reality. The choice belongs to the people in the story and to the people watching it. One side can choose clarity, the other can choose discernment. And if both do, we might yet get a chapter that reads less like a press release and more like a life. And maybe the next time we gather on this porch, the fan will still turn, the night will still be honest, and the only thing spinning will be the record player. Playing something old and steady, a tune that doesn't need a chorus of approval to be true. Ta-ta and bye for now.